All right, welcome to everybody to our forum today. We're going to change it up a little bit. Instead of talking about, like we've been talking about structuring a lot lately and a lot about the working model or the operating model. So today what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the geographical components of services. And we're specifically going to focus on Esri today. We have Esri here that's going to be able to speak with us and show some of the things that we're building to put in the Servicenow store. If today's your first time, we always do this just to get started. If today's your first time, can you put your name in the comments and what you do, just so everybody can welcome you to the group. And we just know that it's your first time here. So this way people can get familiar with you as a member of the group. I know we have a couple first timers that I see on the call. All right. So this group started back in 2018. So we've been meeting bi-weekly since 2018. And what it was in the beginning was to kind of figure out what we're doing with the Cmdb. And a lot of people didn't have that right. So they wanted to get more information on what I should do to structure my service, especially the services part of the Cmdb. And this last year, we structured it more broadly into digital transformation, because that's what we're really trying to do with a lot of these services. These structures we build out, everybody's doing it in the name of being transformative. So we broadened our vision a little bit this year. And what we want to do is enable members to use the platform in order to drive their transformations. So we share as much work, and we're going to share a couple of things today that you can actually download, go onto our shared instance. We also have some things on GitHub. We have things in papers. So there's different places. We're trying to concentrate most of that now on our community site. We started a community about 3 months ago. And all of that information that we're sharing, it used to be on a Google Drive, but now we moved it over to that forum that we have instead. Okay, this is sponsored by the Enterprise Architecture team. So most of the people you'll hear talking, at least part of the segments, we usually try to split. We want to hear what's actually going on in the field. So ideally a customer, and then a kind of a ServiceNow perspective. And it doesn't have to be that way. Sometimes the ServiceNow person might take up the whole speaking time, and some other times the customer may take up the whole speaking times. But the idea here is to mix it so people can understand what's really going on in the real world. And we're going to see that today first. And then kind of the theoretical piece that we usually present from the ServiceNow perspective. Okay, so these are bi-weekly, and there's recordings on our YouTube channel. And we also have a shared instance that you can become. I had that on the previous page. So if you do want to get a login to the shared instance, unfortunately, you can just email me right now. We're going to change that so that we can automate that. But right now it's just by email. And that's been manageable so far. But ideally, we're going to make a link on that homepage so that I can just get an approval and approve the people to come into that shared instance. All right, so that's a little bit of the background. If it's your first time, hopefully that gives you a little bit of an idea of what we do and why we're here. And we want to jump in next. We're going to start off with Todd. He's going to come in and talk about the geography-based employee services. So he's really looking at that back office side. If you want to speak of that language, so front office, back office, and then I'm going to take you into the front end of that. I'm going to speak specifically about public services. And so we're going to kind of divide up the time in that way. So with that, I think I can get Todd going. I see you on there, Todd. Are you ready to take over, share? Are you able to share?
Sure. This will stop sharing. Yes. Okay. I want to share. Okay. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
And
perfect.
It says RTS Map Directory at the top?
Yep.
All right. Okay. Well, thanks, John. And John and I have talked many times over the last couple of years as we've been embarking on this journey with our integration with the ServiceNow. And what we've done is sort of unique, and hopefully you'll see through this that this is sort of a new way of looking at things. And we've followed a model where everything that we're doing is actually updating the data in your Cmdb. It's not reaching out to a geo database, although that is something that's on our roadmap, but it's actually updating data directly in the Cmdb. And here you can see, this is just a test, our partner instance, and different ways that we could use this. This is what our actual production instance looks like. And these are the different ways that we're using GIS that integrates with ServiceNow, the CMDB, and we're heavily leveraging and keeping in mind the Common Services data model and using that. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to jump in here. Also, documentation right on within our app. We're going to have a link to our documentation that will really talk about what Esri is, how this integration works, our digital twin, what that means, why that's relevant, and how this just gives you better insight into your data. So I've got a lot of things to share, so I'm going to jump right in. So the first map that I wanted to show you is a way to integrate if you're an Esri customer and you have existing feature layers and things, and you want to integrate it with your current ServiceNow data. You know, how would we do that? And so one of the things that we've done is integrated our Living Atlas. For you that are Esri customers, is just curated data specifically around authoritative sources. And so you can see that I have different elements. Let me turn this off for a second, that were already listed, load balancers and you know, firewalls and different things at locations. And so now by adding in Living Atlas data, you can overlay the two data sets. And if we wanted to say, hey, I'm concerned because there's this wildfire that's near me, and I want to create an incident based on external data. So you click on it and it will load directly in ServiceNow. Everything we're doing here is in ServiceNow, and it loads information about the wildfire there. This can be customized in any way, and with all of these other areas, if I was going to create an incident, we actually pre-populate the CI directly on the data element. So if I create a CI or an incident here, you can see that the configuration item is automatically populated. So it makes it much easier based on something you already know, the location of things, to create incidents. Now, we found that this is very difficult to find the configuration item sometimes, and so this really makes it easier. Additionally, we built this data viewer. We struggled a little bit. I like the ServiceNow data tree and we actually can link to it from here, is good, and we like it, but we noticed that it didn't resonate sometimes with different business users. So what we've done is built this. This is a relationship viewer, and so you can see that it's super interactive. I can customize the ways that I view it, change the colors if I wanted to, but it really allows you to go relationship to relationship downstream or upstream. And so one of the things that John's talking about with the CSDM, we have this sort of modeled out in here a little bit. So if I said enterprise capability model, and I wanted to look, okay, what are my capabilities? What are things related to other things? And you might say, oh, well, I can't read that, it's too small. We can just increase the size. And I want to go down 6 layers. So you can see processes, different, I'm going to change this to be different color, and I'm going to invert it. And so you can see here, these are different processes, capabilities, and this is one way to view it, but let's say that can't really see it clearly that way. Let's go to a card view of this. You can now see kind of flat view, but you have all of these nested capabilities. And so, well, how are we doing in our capabilities? Mapped down to our services. You can see here PeopleSoft relates to data governance, and it goes all the way down to the infrastructure, this downstream view of things. Well, how are we doing? We actually can overlay heat maps on top of this. So now you can get a sense based on whatever scoring model you choose. And we try to keep this fairly simple. I've maybe to my shame, created about 2,000 ServiceNow reports since 2019 when we started getting involved in ServiceNow, and mostly all our performance analytics. And those are fantastic and great and really, really helpful, but we wanted to see them by relationship. And this allows you to do that. There's another view of this that's really helpful, that also allows you to actually see the relationships, and you can interact with them as well. So you can see the different scoring on these, and when you hover over them, you can see the downstream relationships. So different ways to view things. We also have this as sort of a flat view of that same thing, and you could zoom into each one of these. We also found that people really had a hard time with this Cmdb, as John was talking about, and we're like, okay, we need to figure out a way to show people, to train them. What does the Cmdb, this concept of extended tables is complicated for folks, and there's between a class and a table, and these more advanced topics. And so we've created this for every hierarchy inside of ServiceNow, where you can see, here's a configuration item, and it just dynamically pulls this. It's very similar to the class model, but it gives you this sort of nested view. So hardware extends, computer is extended off of hardware, and you can pretty easily see this. So this is the view by relationship. And so jumping back to kind of a sidebar there, because we heavily use this. I use that tool basically to manage the CMDB. Screen is off a little bit. Let me adjust that. So back to our Living Atlas incident and how we can overlay data with that. So it's a great way to see, help your BCP, DR, emergency services as you integrate. It could be graffiti, potholes, tree trimming. It could be a lot of different things that you could load in here. And speaking of which, I'll show you that here. And what I'm going to do now is I'm actually just going to load a kind of a blank generic desktop map, because we built this windowing system inside of here because I got tired of having 30 tabs open at the end of every day. And so this is basically our layer list. It's the different, it is the different map layers inside of ServiceNow. So if I wanted to open a map within our data viewer, let me just go here to one of the maps, and that's the IoT map, which is also on our front map directory. And I'll just load that right from here. And I'll load this, I'll preview this in 3D. And so this gives you a sense of, what are different things you could do at any site. And it could be, like I said, customers spotting potholes or booking executive conference rooms. There are certain conference rooms that have been determined to be executive for that. You can see here, we've got a site. Everything here is clickable, and these are all configuration items inside of here, so you can manage your cameras. And we actually started doing this, and so ServiceNow is the authoritative source of truth. Sorry if you can hear my dogs there, for cameras, because we have a great visibility into that. So this is a great way to see all of your things. So I could see, here's a camera, and I can open this directly. So these things interact with one another. I could go upstream from there. Well, this is part of this building. Well, let me say I want to go downstream. Show me all the cameras in that building. Let me go downstream, go up here first, and I wanted to see cameras here in building Q. And so you can see that within building Q, it's also related to an IP router upstream, and it's related to this camera's service. So if I want to look at this the other direction, you can see, and we've made the opacity here so it doesn't interfere with the map. I can change the window size, have multiple windows, all of that. So you can see the status of, or the different cameras that are related to this service, digital service that is called for the cameras. One thing I wanted to show you is how easy it is. So you've got these map layers. Let's say, and within those, we've got a tree, a set of trees. So I'm going to view that record. And so these are all made up of different records. And if you're familiar with ServiceNow and its reporting, we tried to make this super easy to use. So this is a map, and now I could even preview this layer from within another map. And so as you're building out your map layers, you could see them. Okay, here's the trees layer. And I can still click on them and I have all these, the ability to see all of these things. But let's say I don't want those trees. I want a different kind of tree. So I just go over here to my renderer and we've got links here to the JavaScript API. So this is interacting with our RTS JavaScript API. And this would take you right to the documentation on how these renderers work. So we're trying to integrate this in a way that's consistent with Esri and also make it so you don't need to know a lot to start building. Esri, let's say we don't want realistic, we want thematic. And I'll save this. And now let's preview and see what these trees look like. So I've simply changed the way that the trees are rendered using Esri web styles. Same location. Oh, and they didn't show up. Let's try. I need to do the tree ones. Tree thematic, tree style. That would help if I choose the right renderer. So I choose that, save it, and then we'll do a preview. And so these are all related to the trees service on the campus. And now you can see that these are all rendered using a different style. But they all are still here. And if I wanted to see what does this look like? How are you rendering these things? How can you get the location? All that. We have a table in here that gives like the details about an object. So you can see here, we've got the latitude, longitude, Z value, all of these things. Well, what if we want to edit a tree in our CMDB? So this is editing data directly in the CMDB. Is that the right one that I chose? Yes, it is. So if I go here and I edit this, move it around, I could rotate it, whatever, update it, you'll see it updated here. So this is how we're actually using data within Servicenow to track all of this and use all of this data. So it really is a powerful way, even though we're calling out to the API, calling an Esri web style, we can still use that. So now we're still in our base map here. I wanted to show you a couple other things. One of them is related to our data centers. And I think, I actually wanted to show you our St. Louis office and how we are interacting with different reports within Servicenow. So I've got this. So we have map layers that are pretty straightforward to use. I'm going to open a dashboard that's using just a Servicenow dashboard with an interactive Servicenow filter, and I'll choose a rack in this case. Because we found that we want to meet people where they already have data in their dashboards instead of forcing them always into an Esri map. So you can see here, these are called map tips. When I'm hovering over the individual object, it actually loads it, the information about that. I can click on it and I could see, I could view, I can get to any data related to that item. And this is actually using relationships in the CMDB to climb down it says the rack, and then it contains these different objects. And so this is a great view to be able to see things. So again, I could choose whatever rack I wanted. So people don't need to know the names of everything. That's what we found is a big challenge, is that they just don't know the names of things. So let's meet them where they are. Similarly, so this is for any rack really that we have. So there's a lot in here. Some have, and over here, it's also interacting with our Cmdb widget, which allows us to see relationships here, and it shows the rack and people. We found that this resonates really well with people. This Sankey view, we just introduced this actually this week because it focuses on the thing that you're interested in. For different services, this is fully interactive from here. So if I could go back to that enterprise capability model, enterprise, enterprise capability model. And if I went down, and it looks a little busy, but it's actually not too bad, because what happens is when you highlight things, it will focus on the areas that you're interested in. And so, and being able to, now you've got your heat map on top of it. And this is drastically changing the conversations that we have, as being able to have this kind of visibility and informing the scoring and how we want to measure our services. And really, it's tying IT to the rest of the organization. We now have conversations with marketing, with facilities, obviously, with accounting, because of how we're managing all of these as assets as well. So it really, and if you have a GIS department, certainly it would be relevant there. So here, same thing with different rooms. You could see conference rooms that you would have. I do have something here. Yeah, so you can see here's a collaboration space. And I could actually click play, and it's just going to rotate around. I can see the different things. I could click on them and see what they are. So really, really an interesting way to view all of this data. One more thing I wanted to share, or I don't want to take all of John's time here, is I wanted to show.
Take all the time you need, Todd. This is awesome stuff.
Oh, thanks. I want to show you, this is also in our demo instance. This is our data center. Let me increase the size of this. So there's a data center, and we're actually using, it's very similar to this, but everything's names and everything have been changed. But you can see that you can actually manage a data center from here. You can see, using the data that's in Servicenow, we're actually pulling the fields here to show how many minutes are remaining on the UPS. So if you have any kind of, we don't own, unfortunately, not performance analytics, but operation intelligence and being able to see events live, but we are doing a lot of integration on things, and being able to see and have visibility into the different things that you're familiar with is super helpful. So,
hey Todd, somebody's asking, how do you onboard the new assets when they come in? Is that just a traditional Servicenow onboarding where you put them into the, okay.
So this is actually traversing from the CI through the model, which is linked to the asset, and that's how it's displaying these. So really, it's helping us dramatically improve our asset management, because if I don't have an asset tied to this in the right way, I'm going to see it as we're building this out. Right. So we've tried to think through, okay, how is this working? And it just traverses right through, and so and makes it fairly easy to see that way. So if I wanted to even say, you know what, I'm really interested, I can't really see exactly what that is. I want to view this model. We can, and we're going to do some enhancements here.
That render for the model, like that you're pulling up now, that's an Esri Render that's inside of UI.
This is not. This we're just calling some libraries that are outside of our application scope. Even this is using D3 libraries, and we're extending our some Dojo libraries to do the windowing system, which Esri uses. But then all of these charts are using D3 libraries. So we're calling out to those libraries. This is using a separate library, but the rendering itself is all ArcGIS JavaScript. Everything in here is all within the maps, is all Esri. Yeah.
Nice. And then there's another question too. A lot of people don't have their data sets for assets, right? So there's a kind of a question outside of this, is how did you get such a clean asset data set? Like, did you have to do a lot of that before this would start working, right?
You mean like the models themselves, or just the way that we're
just getting all the data in? I think, how complete or enriched was your data set from discovery before you were able to start visualizing?
The great thing about this is that in our production thing, we have something that will actually highlight all the discovered devices and all the non-discovered devices, all the things that have assets and don't have assets, and that becomes our burn down list. So it took a little bit of effort in that we had to, organize it and make sure it was right, but it helped us dramatically improve our data. And so I could see from this, we had to obviously put it here, but we have this thing starting slot number. And so you could, and if you've got this, and people have this in spreadsheets everywhere, so you just import this and you have how many slots do you have and the starting slot number. You don't even need to know the Z value, and it will automatically put it in the right spot in your rack. So additionally, we've got these different, because the circuits relate back to the power strips, which relate to the racks and all that. You can measure the lines of your circuits. You could view what things make up this point. Hey, I need to edit this thing. It's not quite right. You just literally click and drag and click off it, and it updates the Cmdb like we were doing with the other objects. So it's a new way. This is not IT and GIS has not really traditionally been a thing. We're trying to make it a thing because we see so many opportunities for this. It's just it's pretty powerful. This is still running in the background, and I've got a map going. One more thing I wanted to show is in our services. There's a service here. Actually, I'll just go out to this because I think this is a good example of property management and being able to see things at a pretty granular level. And this is just a data set that we built, and we've got it where you can click and drag objects right onto the canvas and create CIs from them and then relate them. So, we're building tools that actually do a lot of the heavy lifting for us, because it's complicated to build the relationships and even understand relationships. I found that IT people to this day, super challenging to get them to think relationship, which is what CSDM is entirely based on. It's easy. They want their list view of everything. So even with this, that's why we built this card view, is to, because of that, is people want to see lists of things, even if it looks like, even though it is based on relationship, it looks like a list. So here, this is the Bellagio. And if I wanted to turn this on, the hotel here.
Anybody from the Bellagio on?
Yeah, I know. They'd be like, hey, where did you get this? So we did quite a bit of research to get the information on these. But you can see that we got some pretty detailed things here. But let's say that I wanted to see what would this impact if this one goes down? If customers walking by, they see, and they could have an easy way to report an issue with one of the fountains. What if this thing goes down? What is that going to impact? What are the upstream relationships? View affected services, and it's using the script that runs when you create a change to decide what services are affected. And it shows, okay, the oarsman, that's the name of the fountain service, and then the office and that. So it's climbing up, and that's for any of the objects that I've clicked on. So if your relationships are good in your CMDB, you have a way to view these. And this one's an interesting one, I think. If I look at this going upstream and downstream, I go view, generate. I want to go upstream, and I want to see this fountain service here. Generate toggle direction. I like this one because it really shows the relationships well, and that you can see, okay, you've got this service for fountains. And you've got different types. You've got the pipes here. You've got the different types of fountains that are included here that make up this service. So it's an easy way to kind of see, oh, we have this is how many we have. They actually have about double this in real life of these different super shooters and extreme shooters and oarsmen. And this is a great way. And so if I wanted to say, hey, I need to view a list of all this stuff, I just want a flat list view. This is a way to do that. We've created a special way to look at downstream, however many records you want, 292. We had to do some custom stuff here because it'll break a URL in a traditional web browser. So then
auditors will just walk out after you show them that. It's like, like, thank you, I'm done.
Yeah. And so,
Nice.
and from here, I can whoops, ungroup. I can actually create a report off of this too. So now you can, so I spent a tremendous amount of time with the Cmdb Query Builder, and I just got, everyone has been a little challenged by it, honestly, because you can't, it has to complete the full relationship path. And so you can't see something like this. If something goes down 2 layers, but then something else goes down 6 layers, you can't ever get to that 6th layer. So this allows you to be able to have full visibility all the way down of all of your data. So you can report off of this. This becomes a point in time sort of performance analytics view of your service. So super powerful. We're really excited about this. And, you know.
Hey, Lou, why don't you come off mute?
All right, I didn't want to interrupt. So I figured I'd start rapid fire with the questions. Put them in the chat, and this looks great, but there was some questions, more concerns I would have. I mean, how many CIs are in the CMDB, right? When we've experienced 12 million so far, we start seeing degradation of forms loading because, you know, it's building all those relationships in the background. And
yeah, so we have in our production instance, we have 4 million, and we have seen that with a lot of the cloud assets. And I think I've been in some heated discussions with support on this, because after it's really what we've seen is per object, if you have more than, I think, like 150 or 200 relationships to one thing, you start to see issues. So if this oarsman has 200, yeah, you can start to see issues around this point. So you could break this down into additional services, and then you'd be fine.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we're up, like I said, 12 million, and I'm saying 6 to 8 seconds, you know, for forms to sometimes load, right?
Yeah.
And there's no stopping the relationships that Discovery is going to, you know, start building, especially with something like this, because you're going beyond the traditional servers, firewalls, routers, you know, you're getting into the cameras and you know, all the little SCADA system components and things like that.
The biggest issues we've seen are on like ESX servers, where they just connect to everything, or network devices. And so what we actually do here is we filter these out. You can filter them out from here, whatever you want. And you can say, I want to add, okay, I have location and location detail. Let me add in another column that I want to see, but you can say what classes to include or exclude and what fields to include as tooltips right from here. So this gives you a filtered view to filter out the things that are the really noisy CIs. Like if I'm going to really see a downstream object and it has to go through any kind of routers and switches, you're done, because it will hit thousands. Everything connects to everything right on the network. You have to kind of filter those out, is what we're finding, or create a path that's through something. So
and do you save that filter like you do in the dependency maps, where you can create your, you know?
So these are all the different filters that we have. So I have power chain classes. So yeah, this is in a table. We're using these built-in Servicenow tables. We found we had to use 5 different tables to link all of it. So now we just built something that's super simple, that is a table within the application scope that does this. And so for power chain classes, nothing's going to show up because there's no power, nothing there. But I open this up, and you would see, you know, UPS, power strip, and so then my view of the world is completely different, and it's really great to be able to filter that out, and then also create custom technical services that we can access through here. So I can access any CMDB group from here too. If I said I want to see tier 1 applications, or I want to see ESX servers, all of them, and their relationships downstream or upstream, this would do that. So actually, if I had a CMDB group that was called that. So yeah, so we've run into all of those issues, and we found that you can have a lot of CIs, but the things that are noisy, you've got to deal with those. And if you can do that, then it runs pretty well, unless you have the conditions column in a list view, it will kill anything, I found. So when I'll do a sys report and I'll look at all the reports and I'll add that conditions column, boy, it just causes major issues.
Well, yeah, because the dependency maps just out of the box will show if there's fiber controller disks there and there's, 50 of them, they're all going to try to build on that map. And who cares? All right, there's 50 disks. I don't need to see them all, blurring.
Right. Right. It's not relevant necessarily. Or we had built a Cmdb maintenance application at the same time ServiceNow came out with theirs, because we're like, we need to clean up the software. We need to clean up the memory modules on servers that are retired. We might want the name of the system still in there, but I don't need the associated software and memory modules and DNS names and all these other things. Let's clean all that up. Let's just keep what we need for reporting purposes historically, but everything else. And really, it's key to understanding, to understanding this view of how everything's related. If you can do that, the CSDM kind of pops and comes alive.
Yeah, what about the responsiveness at the client? Your machine seems pretty responsive building these, but is this machine you're using boosted? In other words, will this work in any person's laptop with the responsiveness?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I have a MacBook and a desktop, and right now I'm running this on my desktop. It runs fine on my MacBook, but the problem is I'll have 6, 7 maps open at a time. If you have one, it's great. It's no problem. It's fine. It's super responsive. But you're right. It is a little bit higher of a hit on some certain things. Like this view is a beast a little bit, because it's just, and that's why we built the interactive filters to just show one rack at a time, to just show one location at a time, because we found that it's really easier. And people already have the dashboards built out. Let me interact with those versus forcing them to go into a map separately. I can just add in a map to an existing dashboard. And so it's great for demos to be able to show, something that is the full data center, but really an admin or other people may only want to see, as Cmdb admin, I need to see the whole thing. But the traditional IT admins, they want to see their storage rack. They want to see where they know it's approximately here. An office admin, this is another thing that we've been spending some time on. Love this. This is great. This is a way to manage your offices and your rooms. And this is an office here that's been built out. But yeah, this one is a little bit heavy. But if you do per room, you can now see different conference rooms and how they relate.
So I wasn't here at the beginning, so it was probably my last question, because I lost the context. I was about 15 minutes late. It's leveraging ArcGIS, the free tool. I mean, how is this these maps and everything? Is that a plug-in from the store? What is that?
It's reaching out to the ArcGIS API for JavaScript. Okay. It's using the libraries from that. It's reaching out and calling those libraries, and those libraries have a lot of built-in things, which is linked to ArcGIS Online, which is a major Esri. I mean, we have billions of maps that are generated every month from around the world. So really, the business leader in mapping and business leader in workflows, it's like two puzzle pieces fitting together. But that's how we're leveraging it, is using the API for JavaScript. And in our map, one final thing I'll show you, I think that would be useful. This is a way to actually, controllers for doors and things like that, and managing your assets, if you wanted to see when's the last time this was cleaned and you want to set up schedules, and then you can just see that through here, the operational status of devices, which ones are operational and which ones are not. All of that, you can do this directly using the ArcGIS API for JavaScript, which also has a built-in language called Arcade, which does, can do querying based on geography, basically. So that's what it's leveraging. We are like, if ServiceNow is the house and ArcGIS and Esri is the door, we're the hinges, just linking them together. That's what we're doing, and we're extending the functionality as well. And people are surprised at how fast this is. And partly it is because we're directly calling, right? Every step we take, we say, what's the performance hit on this? How can we make this faster? I might have a couple of developers on the call, but I have fantastic developers that we're all working together on this, talking about this every day, and how to make sure that it's responsive. It's really even extending the ideas for internally with Esri. And so you could build on top of our indoors product, but this would just be in using our documentation site. I think I still have that up here. It actually would walk you through, once we release this in the store. Okay, how do you get started? Okay, you do this, you get an API key. You know, you go in here and you put it, like, we're trying to make it really easy for folks to do this. So we're excited about it. I'm in IT, I'm not in sales. I'm just building this, but I know that it's sort of a unique thing in that we've traditionally, you put all your data in a geo database, and if you have it there, we can also reference it from here, but it's storing it in the data you already have. It's just showing that if you have a great CMDB, this is just going to light up when you turn it on.
And it's going to be on the store, right, Todd? That's where.
Yes, the plan is for it to be on the store any month here. We're just having internally at Esri. It's you know, how do we do this? It's sort of a new thing where we're so deeply integrated with another platform, and this better together story is really powerful.
Did I miss the maps with regards to CSDM and the relationships between business apps, consuming app services, depending on by service offerings?
We'll put that in the recording. He went through that earlier, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that was right at the beginning. He went through some of the CMDB stuff.
Cool. Thank you.
Sure. Yep. Okay. Thanks, John.
Awesome. Great demo, Todd. That's awesome. It's come a long way since the last time I saw it even. So
yeah,
you guys must be doing a ton of work.
Yeah, well, we're just, as use cases come out, and we have like a dozen of them, we're just continuing to build out different tools and different ways to visualize things.
Awesome. All right, I want to switch to some less visual stuff, but some Esri use cases that I've recently run into that I've been working on, and I'm going to show you two of them. Just these are things that you can. I'm going to show you how you can get them too if you wanted to use some of them. But the first one is where once a case. So we're doing a case record here, and the simulation I was doing for one of the states is they have somebody that comes in for help for a senior, and once that person is authorized help, they connect them to providers that can provide the help. Then they would do in-home service. So what we want to do is we want to automate that step to when they approve the request. We want to automate that part where it says, okay, these are the providers that you're authorized to use, because we don't want providers driving 150 miles, right, to render service in somebody's home for healthcare. And so that was the first use case that we had. And I just want to show you a little bit about what that looks like. And it gets back to a little bit of what Todd was talking about, where we want to use those APIs. So the first thing I did is I made a pretty simple API call, and that, like Todd said, that's really well documented. And you don't have to do all the parsing here, right? So I can do a REST call out, and then once I do the REST call out, I can go ahead and get the result set back and then parse it, and then I'm able to pass it back so that I can use it in my workflow. So the first one was pretty simple. I just needed to go ahead and I'll put in I'll show you what that looks like. If I run a test here, and this is just going to take an address, right? So I'd format the address out of the, or I'd create the address out of the either location data or directly out of the form that gets created. Oh, my paste not working, so I have to put my address in here. And now everybody sees where I live. Okay, and then when I run the test, what it's going to do is going to take that data, and then what the API does, this like I said, this really basic one, it's going to give you candidates that match that, right? So one of the things that it does when you look it up, it does address normalization. So I passed it the address to the call, then the action came back, and it said, yep, everything worked okay. and then it gave me a lat long. Now, if I want to see the details, I can actually see all the dirty details of what it passed back, right? So I passed these in as parameters, and when it came back and returned the information back from the call, you can see that this is the output data. So it gives me all these coordinates, and it says, yep, this one here is 100% match. So if there were 5 that were close, it would give me the one with the highest probability of being a match. And all I do is I take that at the end, I'm taking that in the action, and I'm passing it back inside of my outputs. So all I want to do is I want to put in a real basic string address, and I want to return a lat long. Right. So in my output here, you'll see that this little spoke that I built just returns the lat long for the location. Right. So this is really good, like I said, for address normalization, for a bunch of things. If you're pulling them out of forms, you want to get that as best you can, and that little API will do that. Now, the next thing we had to do, I had to create another spoke that we didn't have with Esri, and I used a different API. So there's another one. If you go in that book that Todd showed earlier, I was going to show that, but it's great he did. I'm using this thing called closest facility. And what I can do here with closest facility is I can pass it an input. So I can say, this is my service provider list. And I can pull that from my location database in Servicenow. So what I was able to do to build this service provider list is you just go look up locations with a parent called service provider, and then you could create an array and pass that array down here, right? And what this will do is it'll take my current lat long, which could be passed in from my address lookup because that's what it returns, and then my list of service providers, and it's going to say, okay, out of that from that lat long, these are the closest ones. So this one, when I run the rest step, it's going to go ahead and I want to show you, I left this out. So I have some default values in here. I'm not actually passing this yet because I wanted to show you a little test here and how this stuff is a lot easier when you're using the Servicenow framework. Okay, so this is going to pass back something that looks really nasty. And this is where this is where a lot of people get frustrated and they stop using the APIs. So the response here, right, it's going to return a bunch of directions to how to get the closest facility. Right? And you don't want to work with that mess because now you got to start coding like crazy. Well, if you're using Servicenow, what you can do is you can go in here and you could say, okay, that I got that action back, right? I ran the action, it returned something. But now what I want to do is I want to add a step here and I want to go ahead and parse that information out. So I don't want to write a bunch of code to parse the information. So what I can do is I can come here and use the JSON parser. And then I paste that nasty stuff back in here so I don't have to deal with it. And I click on here and it's going to actually build that structured return set for me. So now I'm working with a really clean thing that gets me all the routes that I need. And then I could start creating the returns from there. So I can pull my outputs right from that set. And I could say, okay, just get me the 5 closest routes out of that data set and return it in outputs. And it's kind of the same way I did it here. When I did the address lookup, I had a little step that said, just go get this stuff out of JSON and just return those 2 things, right, from my top candidate. So you can do the same thing in that other return set. When I do the nearby lookup, I can go ahead and pick out the top 3 and drop those in my outputs or my top 5, whatever the case might be. I might even want to create another input to say, how many locations do you want? Well, I want the top 10. In this case, we're trying to give it back to a patient who needs care. So I want to give them the top 10 places they can go to get that care. There's a lot of things you can use this for. Mark Bodman did a video on CSDM where it was location-based services. Hey, I got a laptop I need fixed. Well, hey, John's in San Diego, so it's going to put me in my San Diego location. Or when I'm in Santa Clara, if I'm closer to the headquarters there, it could say you can go to that help desk and get the. So you can use this for a lot of different things, the combination of these 2. So what it might look like is if you go to my flow test, right, is I create a record. So this was the record coming in from our public sector digital services. It looked up the address. It looked up the locations in the table that I need. So it built an array of locations. Then it gave the locations and the address from the record, and it did a nearby lookup. And then at the end, it sent an email to the person that was asking for service. So now I don't have that agent sitting in the chair, sitting here swivel chairing and saying, where does that person live? Go look at a map. Okay, these are the 5 locations, cutting and pasting that into an email. Now it's all automated, right? So now we could just send the email and I can give them the list of providers from that list, right? So this created an array in there with all the providers. It built an array and I could just dump that back to the user as I go, so that the email is all formatted at the end and you automate that whole step. Now all the code I sent you here, that I showed you here, if you did want to use this, it is on my public repo. So you can just go get Esri nearby, and just what I showed you today is all that's there. So it's not fully working, right? Because you'd have to code it and say, okay, what type of case am I attaching it to, or what's my use case? I just wanted to show you those examples. So you got to do some more work to use it, but it's probably 75% of the way there for some really good use cases. And to show you one other one that I have in here, and I know we're running out of time. So this is one that we have running in a couple of places for 311. And a lot of times you have, almost anywhere I go, any municipality who's mostly I deal with, you'll see, put in your name, your address, your city, state, zip. What we can do here is we can embed an Esri map, right? So this way the map lets you either pick the location, or I can type in a location. And this is using all Esri to look up the locations for you, because you don't want to look up the Servicenow locations because there's not a lot of them, right? So we want to use the Esri data set so we get every location. And this way, when I submit this, my address is already normalized, right? So when I submit this in the back end, this is passing back to that name and address field. It's passing back this information that Esri gave me when I clicked on a point. And so this gets rid of all of the, in the back end, I have to normalize the address. And it also gets rid of your end users having to type in 3 lines every time they submit a form with you, right? So if they are somewhere, we'll find their location. I don't know if you recognize, but when I turn this on, it also has Find Me built in. If they have that turned on, it'll bring you to that current location. So that is available. It's also on our workgroup instance. So if you want to get it off there, that's also on the GitHub repo. That is in our public service template. All right, so that's a real quick demo of that piece. So there's a couple ways you can use it on the front end for either routing, or you can use it for the filling out the form. There's also, like here, I could pretty easily take this map and I could say, hey, give me my closest COVID testing locations. And what it could do is it could pull back the map and show me here's 3 CVSs and a Walgreens. And right, so that stuff we did, we can mix and match those because it's just data on a layer, right, on a map layer that shows you how to get there. Now, what I'm using here is an Esri leaflet. And again, what I'm using on the back end are those JavaScript APIs. So if I go into this leaflet that I built in ServiceNow, there's the server script that renders the map, but I have to put this API key in from Esri in order to make this work. So when you take this code set, you're gonna have to put your own API key in. Now, the way that you can get that, I'm gonna show you a little bit more about this, but we're running out of time. The way that you can get that API, right, is you go out to the site and you can get a free API key for testing purposes. So when you go here, you just create an account on developers.arcgis.com, and it'll give you that API key that you can use. And you can use it for like base maps and a couple other things. The closest facility one, you have to have a paid user. So I had to actually pay for the account because that closest facility lookup is pretty expensive, right? There's a lot of querying there because it gives you street by street address directions to that location, but also the distance away. So that where they give you the lookup one, I could do with free. I wouldn't be able to do the closest facility without having a licensed user to give me access to that data set. Okay, so if I come back here, you would be able to take this, and if you downloaded it and you wanted to use either the built-in map or the lookup, both of those you can get with that free key. The only thing I did here after I got the regular map running, and I'm going to show you how I did that, is now you can take data, right? You take data from the map that's being rendered. And this is just a widget on ServiceNow. So you take the data from the map and you're able to pass it back in the client controller, you can actually pass the data back into your variables. So this is where I'm getting the longitude, latitude, and then the location name. I'm getting all that back from the API call. And that's what Todd was saying before, very similar to the way that he gets, like when he clicks on a thing on the map, he not only gets the location, but he also gets the asset information, right? So you have basically two data sets just by clicking on a point. It's just floating out there in the client. So now what you got to do is you got to rip that stuff out of the client and you got to be able to use it in the fields, right? So that's what we're doing down here. And that's what you'd have to do in the client controller. So that the one that's pre-built now will give you this Esri widget. And what the widget does, so let me just show you what that looks like real quick, because what you want to do is you don't want to have to deal with this every time. So what happens is you would go in and you would look at a catalog. So I have the illegal fishing record producer. And with that record producer, so this way, that's what you're seeing on the portal, right? Is that record producer. And then underneath that, I'm using two variable sets. So the variable set, one builds the map, and then one catches the information that the map passes back, like the lat long and the other piece. So this way you have those two variable sets, and I could use those in any piece I want, right? I can use it in any catalog item I want instead of having to rebuild that every time. So now they're reusable components across the platform. All right, one other use case that I'll bring up real quick is we're working on one now, and Todd and I have had some conversations about this, where you have this huge data set. And one of the ones that came up was people are working on what they call a linear asset. And a linear asset is, hey, I have the pipeline for the Westfield Park location. I have the sprinkler pipes, and the sprinkler pipe is broken. Well, you have an asset called sprinkler pipe for Westfield Park, and it's a big deal, right? You don't have enough information. So what you would do is you would click on a part of the pipe, and then there's a linear asset. So it'd say, hey, that's section 201 out of 500. So that gives the dispatcher the section of the pipe they need to work on. Now, there's a couple choices you can do here if you want to use that to create a case in ServiceNow. Is A, you can take it and create that asset from that pipe information. So Esri pulls up the location, so you can create the location. It also pulls up the asset, so you can create the asset. B, you can just take it if you don't want to put that in your asset database, and you can just use it to fill out your short description for the work order. Right, so now you have the work order, I have the location, I could put a direct link in the description of the case for the person I'm dispatching. So I could fill all that out in text just from where Todd was clicking, right? Todd was clicking on those components. So if it's not in ServiceNow, you have the option of just taking the location information out of it for that point in time case, instead of having to worry about that location being in the ServiceNow database. Okay, so one, there's this concept of transient assets where I can dump that pipe in there just for the time I need it. Or there's the second one, I could just use the textual information from that API call to give the technician what they need for that one case. So this really expands what you can do for cases, because you can do work orders, rather, broad set of work orders across any data set. So usually Esri is going to have 75 facilities are all mapped out. And that facilities data set with Esri, they could be coming from anywhere. You might have 75 facilities with 25 back-end Maximo systems housing all that information. So now what we can do is we can dispatch somebody for a work order using that information from those Maximo systems. Okay, so use the map, think about it a little broader in terms of not only is it giving me information about where something is, but it's also giving me information about a lot of somethings with all these layers. So those layers basically give you free API calls, is what I'm saying. If you use the layer, Esri is going to take care of all that back-end calling out to those data sources to bring back into you. I know we're at time. I didn't have time to go over the topics for the next area, but we don't have a topic for the next 2 weeks. If anybody has any topics they'd like to discuss, go ahead and shoot them my way. I know I've heard a lot, but I haven't had anybody step up yet for CSDM examples. And I saw Mitch reaching out. But if anybody does have any CSDM examples, real world examples, not the ones that we show, then go ahead and bring them to us so that we can go ahead and talk about them on the next call. That'd be great to have some of those because a lot of people are trying to get that CSDM work done. All right, so a lot of information today. I will send out the recording. I'll have it up on our YouTube playlist by the end of the day. And Todd, thanks for speaking. That was great information, and we'll see you all in 2 weeks, everybody.